Good morning, everyone. At least it's morning California time. I wanted to just do a couple of brief introductions, but before I do that, just wanted a show of hands on a couple of questions just to be able to read the audience. How many from the audience are here and work for an advertising agency or a marketing firm currently? Okay, cool. And then how many are here client side working on the brand perspective? Cool. Well, welcome. Well, hopefully we'll have a great presentation. We're a fun group, so let's have some fun. And I'm going to start with a little bit of an icebreaker, but let me do introductions first. So the topic is brands and agencies, success stories for working better together. Before I get into that, I'm supposed to read some disclaimer language. Almost forgot, right? So cell phones, because we are going to be videotaping and streaming content, so if you wouldn't mind, please put those either on silent or vibrate. Pretty please. We'd also like at the very end for you to submit an evaluation. Be kind. No, but truthfully, we'd love to understand what works and what doesn't work. And then lastly, as I mentioned, the reason for the phone just privilege around being at silent is that we do videotape everything and audio tape, so please be respectful. Cool, well, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Megan Fierno, and I work at Factory Design Labs, and we are a global lifestyle advertising firm headquartered in Denver, Colorado, so pleasure to be here, and I will be leading the session. And then I would also like to introduce my partners in crime, if you will. Let me start over here to the left. This is Jeff Smith, who's Senior Vice President of Product Leadership for Ad Effectiveness at Nielsen. Welcome, Jeff. And then sitting next to Jeff is Brad Geiger, who is a Senior Art Director at Leapfrog Interactive. So thank you. To my right is Jessica Randazza, Vice President Strategy and Business Development at Interference, Inc. And then at the very end is Mike Kroll, Vice President Global Marketing at Oakley. So thank you. So here we go. So we thought, given the topic and given the conference in general, we thought we'd open up with a little bit of icebreaker, because we're all in the business of communication, yet communication seems to be the foible of why relationships work and don't work. So I'd like to play you a short video.
How do you set up success criteria for forging a stellar brand agency partnership? You parody all the things that can and do go wrong.
Hey there. Long time no see. Looking good.
I want a divorce.
So, here's the expected bribery vaguely disguised as a goodie bag.
I think we have the opportunity to make this piece hit a little harder.
Yeah, harder.
Childish, immature, and selfish, that's right, I am. Do you know how much money I make for thinking this way?
It is economically unsound to grow up. You're right.
I've tried to cram as many ideas as I can into this brief because I'm really too weak and too stupid to make a decision.
So let me ask a question in order to give the illusion that I actually give a shit.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I'll construct a presentation using the words strategic, authentic, and branded content as much as possible.
These ideas are great. I say that in hope that this submoronic psychology will help influence your decision.
This was marked 1999.
Yeah?
Well, I've only got $7 set aside for this.
I'll pay for the highlights next time, but for now, I need you to just go ahead and throw them in.
So basically, you want me to work for free?
No, I don't want you to work for free.
We're looking for stopping power. Yeah. I mean, and still get it by tomorrow.
It's a product no one wants for completely the wrong audience, and they need it by tomorrow.
Yeah, I think we need a more complete call to action so people know exactly what to do after the pause.
You guys got all that?
We're trying to kill this brief under the guise of ethics because we know we'll never win an award with it.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is a term that is used as a blatant attempt to mislead consumers because we're really too cheap to improve our product's formulation.
Well, I can cover your hard costs, but that's really as far as I'm willing to go.
We've ignored everything you told us and followed our own whim.
Yeah. And, here's a final nail in the creative coffin. You have to use the teddy bear icon.
The teddy bear, yes.
Yeah.
So, a lighthearted way to be able to attack the content. And there's no doubt, definitely by some of the smiles in the room, that we've all experienced this situation in one form or another. And of course, being on the agency side, I experience this more often than not. So, welcome. We're going to take you through a journey of how we're going to talk about basically the idea of working together in the premise of a relationship. And we're going to start at the very beginning with what does it look like when you're in the dating phase, when you're not quite married yet, or you're not under contract, you truly don't have a client relationship yet, and Jessica's going to handle that. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about what really should happen in the first 90 days. From my historical perspective, what's worked and what hasn't worked, and what are some really great rules to be able to move forward and kick off a relationship. We're going to move next to Mike, and he's going to talk about how to inspire great ideas, not only from a client perspective, but certainly he's going to also share some of his insight relative to also working on the agency side of things. And then Jeff is going to talk about when you're in a relationship, how do you make sure that alignment is still the primary focus? Because this is where communication definitely can unravel. And then last, but certainly not least, it's always our goal to have long, enduring, sustainable relationships, and the key to that is keeping the spark alive. And Brad's going to help us with that. So without further ado, I'm going to turn over to Jessica.
All right. Good morning. So as Megan mentioned, I am the Vice President of Strategy and Business Development for Interference Incorporated, and we do sort of full-service marketing. And as the business development lead, I go on a lot of first dates. Agencies actually, business development, people at agencies, I read a stat, go on about 80% of their clients are first dates, or they go on, yes. They don't go on second dates, 80% are just first dates. And anyone who has ever sat through drinks or coffee in search of their love knows that first dates are both exhilarating and also nerve-wracking. Courting clients and agencies isn't that different from courting a potential match. You're nervous as hell, but you still want to make a good impression and hopefully seal the deal. So here's a few tips for how to make sure you're sealing that deal. The first one is don't be a blind date. I'm constantly surprised by the number of people that go to meetings without knowing what the hell they're about. Showing up for a meeting, not knowing anything about the company, not knowing anything about the conversation that you're going to have. I mean, what the hell is the point? You've wasted an hour. And I read this stat, I thought it was so interesting, that 43% of singles Google someone before they go on a first date. I certainly Google all of my clients, find out what they're about. And studies show that remembering a bit of information about that person and working that into the conversation shows true interest and connectivity to seal that deal. How many agencies agency people in here are niche? You do some sort of specific kind of product. Yep. So I think that's absolutely has its place, but I think giving up this idea of a type, thinking about, you only sort of date this one type of company or brand limits you. So just being open to new kind of conversations can be stimulating. And then walking into that first meeting, always aligning on what the objectives are. Thinking about why you're there, what's the purpose, what do you want to get out of this first date, how can it be meaningful for you? So another tip is keeping the conversation flowing. We all want to have a good conversation. We want to have stimulating ideas. And having stimulating ideas in that first date will inspire a desire to have a second date. So not only talking about yourself, but really digging into what this potential client's or agency's needs and challenges are as you're sort of dating those people. Knowing what they're about, where they're coming from, can certainly help you win the business. And understanding what their problems are and weaving how your company can help solve those problems and issues. So actually listening, stepping back, digesting it, and knowing if you're not a fit, that it's okay to say you're not a fit. Not always feeling like you have to close that deal. And just as in dating, creating a dialogue that organically reveals common interests and shared values gives you the opportunity to figure out how you're going to explore a potential path together. Knowing that, sometimes it feels right and sometimes it doesn't, which takes me to the next. So tempering expectations. Business relationships are built on trust. As you're starting dating, you want to feel connected to that person. You want to trust them. You want to know that they're going to be there for you. The same goes true with business relationships. And a lot of first dates I've been on, both professionally and personally, there's not instant fireworks there every single time. Otherwise, that might be a little overstimulating. But sometimes those instant fireworks can lead to other conversations. And then follow up a few times and carry out your end of the bargain. But know when they're just not into you. When I first started doing business development, I was constantly heartbroken by them not responding to my emails. Going on all these first dates and not hearing back from them was just, it feels like a kick. Does anyone in here do business development? Yeah, so being told no freaking sucks. And so it's hard to sort of step back and say, sometimes they just aren't into you. It's not a fit. And knowing that there's plenty of fish. Pursuing only brands and agencies that you feel something for. I promised myself years ago when I started in marketing that I was never going to work on a brand that I didn't believe in. How the fuck can you work on a project and market that project when you don't feel anything for it? Why do that? Listen to your gut. Know what you're passionate about. If you're not passionate about the lottery and the stories that come into the lottery, don't work on the lottery. And then pay attention to the red flags. Know when to say game over. If in the dating cycle you're being abused, if you're being mistreated, if you're not getting that response, if you're giving away the milk and not getting anything in return, giving up all your ideas, then just walk away. And know that those breakups, even when they're difficult, that can free you up to find something better, something more meaningful, and something, greater. And then use those failed dates as a way of learning what you do want and you don't want. And future partners. Every time I go into a new business meeting, I walk out of it thinking, I sort of assess it and think, okay, I really like this part of the conversation. I really like what they're doing there. But if it's not a fit for me, if it's not a fit for them, then I want to make sure that I'm still setting them up with something meaningful. So following up and connecting them with someone that might be a better fit. I'm, constantly thinking about how to move on to give them better dates, better opportunities. So that's dating your prospects.
We're going to hold questions to the end. So dating, it's interesting because during the dating period, that's really what we look at as in terms of first 90 days. Someone once told me very early on in my career that you're never as smart on a brand or on a client than you were when you actually pitch them. And we like to, when we think about renewing a relationship with a client, you really should approach the client every year, whether they ask for it or not, and do really a review of their business and pitch them like they are brand new again. It's critical. The learning is unbelievable. So let me share with you a little bit about what we do in the first 90 days. And this could be, again, during the new business, during basically the journey of new business and actually closing the piece of business, or actually when you've gotten the contract and what do you do next. So a couple of different sets here. First step is you got to set up a foundation for mutual respect. And what I mean by that is you have to understand how your client wants to be communicated to, right? What are they email? Do they like face-to-face meetings? Do they like concise and short correspondence? Do they want you to have one point of contact? Do they want multiple point of contacts? Do they want to be involved in the creative process? Understand what makes them tick and how they like to work, and that will help you. Every account team should be customized to be able to deliver against the nuances of what a client wants and how they want to communicate. Very, very important, step one. Step two, you need to know their history. Jessica talked a little bit about the Googling in terms of being able to understand the people involved, very important, understand what their passions are and their interests, but also know the history of the company. The biggest question that we ask the brands that we work on is, who have you historically been when you were at your best? Okay? Example of that would be Callaway, a recent client of ours. They were at their best with the Big Bertha. They are not at their best now. Understand why they were at their best. What were the nuances? Who was leading the corporation? What was the culture like? What products were they making? What was the tone of the work? So understand what they were like when they were at their best. Step 2. Step 3, understand their vision. You have to understand, and it's bigger than goals. It's bigger than a marketing plan. What are you chasing together? What, not only as a vision of a company, but individually. You need to understand how your most senior marketing partner on the brand side is bonused. Very, very important. How are they making money? How are they being evaluated in terms of a performance evaluation? What are they chasing? And so you can understand, you can align your goals and your method of working with them against their goals. If you make them look good, they will make you look good. Step 4, memorize all these things that you uncover from them, their goals, their strategies, and review it often to make sure that you're not only on the same page, but that you're also marching and running against the same thing. It's not unusual in the throes of creating great work and implementing strategies that things go wrong, right? There's marketplace dynamics. There's all sorts of different external forces at work. Revisit the goals and strategies often, and this will help you keep on point. And then the last piece of it, which is really important, which comes down to the nuance around people, is you need to foster a symbiotic culture. I'll give you a for instance. For our ski brands, we hire advertising professionals who ski. For our golf brands, we hire advertising professionals who golf. If you put people in a place to service a client's brand that are passionate about that brand and that industry, it's amazing the things that will happen. This is when surprise and delight really, really starts to take hold. You're doing, first of all, a lot more business outside of the office, and you're also able to think and walk and talk like their consumer. And this is really, really important, especially for those of you out there that don't have a planning arm to your agency. This can be satisfied if you hire people who understand the industry and who are passionate about the industry that your client works in. So 5 steps. So let me talk to you a little bit about relationships, both from an agency perspective and a client perspective. Relationships are king, right? Here's a great quote. All things being equal, people will do business with people they like. All things being unequal, they still will. Fundamental truth. So what do agencies want, right? I'm sure you will all agree with this. We want clients who aren't afraid of risk. Right? And it's not just from an awards perspective, it's about doing the best work of our careers, right? Pushing the envelope, disrupting the marketplace. We also want clients who share mistakes and glory. It's a continual learning environment. Agencies are not perfect, and neither are clients. Open, honest, mutual respect, and optimism. Being very direct early on about things not working or what it takes to get things back on track is really, really critical to the road to success. Also, we want essentially clients who award great work. There's nothing better. And when a reward of great work happens, it's magical for the agency. First of all, it attracts other people to want to work on their business. That's number 1. And number 2, it just breeds a culture of winning, and that's important because you always want to have a culture of winning when you work on a client's brand. We want clients who steer and inspire. We also want clients who lead the decision-making process. We do want to be held accountable, and we do want alignment. It's very important every year that you renegotiate, and I'm not talking financially, renegotiate the subjective terms of your relationship every year. It's really, really important because you always level set, and clients, there's lots of transition, so make sure that you do that and understand where you sit. From a client perspective, and I was a client as well, clients want a core team of passionate brand enthusiasts. This goes back to the symbiotic brand culture. Very, very important. You want people who love your brand as much as you do. We also want, as a client, agency partners who listen and respond. It's not about the call report or the conference report, whatever it's being called these days. It's truly about, are you hearing me? And do you really understand what I'm talking about? Also, will not let a great idea die. Mike and I had a really interesting discussion this morning about debate is great. Embrace it. Out of chaos, we laugh. We happen to be a digitally focused agency, and I love paper, and it scares everybody to death, but embrace chaos. Sometimes during the chaos, that's where great ideas live and breathe, and don't be afraid of the debate and the deconstructing of things, because it always helps build things back up. Also, have some fun. We're not curing cancer. Remember that at the end of the day. So in a lot of respects, it's both of our jobs to inject a little fun into our lives, be nimble and quick to respond. And at the end of the day, the greatest mantra that a very, very dear client had said to me is that I want to know at the end of the day that my agency partner has my back. And what does that mean, right? I mean, that's really understanding what having their back truly, truly means to them. And it could be about driving more consumers. It could be about making more money. It could be about selling more products. It could be about, which I've done many times, ghostwriting their marketing plan. Understand what that means, because once you become indispensable, that's where things get really, really exciting and powerful. And indispensability is a key word that you need to understand. And I basically applaud all of you for saying, find out what it takes to make your client indispensable. And once you know that, write it down and run your entire agency around how to drive that client and how to make a difference in their lives, whether it's professionally or personally. And my last piece of advice is try to treat every meeting like it's your last. Very, very important. From whether it's the people that are sitting at the table, to the content that you're going to review, to the ideas, to sometimes even the food. It's really, really important. With that, I'll turn it over to Mike, who, by the way, is my client, so this is an interesting dynamic.
Would you, perfect. Well, I'm kind of a spaz, so I can't sit up on stage, so if you guys don't mind, I'm going to come down here. So it's interesting. They're like, can you come and speak at AdTech about inspiring great ideas? And I'm like, well, inherently, doesn't that say that I think I have it all figured out, which I don't. So you're going to see a theme here against that. So I was like, what are great ideas? And I've told this story before, but I have a 6-year-old son, and he was like, Dad, come play with me. I'm like, sorry, I got to do the laundry. And he's like, come on, Dad, come play with me. And I'm like, I got to take the stuff out of the washing machine. I got to put it in the dryer. So I got to do that. And he's like, well, why don't they just make a tube that connects the washing machine to the dryer so you didn't have to do that? I'm like, that's actually a really good idea. Patent pending, so no one tried to take it. But the fact is, I feel like I'm qualified to talk about inspiring great ideas for 2 reasons. One, I'm a child too. I'm totally immature. I'm totally okay with that. So first criteria, check. And then the second is common sense is the genius dressed in working clothes. I've got pretty good common sense, so therefore, technically, between those 2 criteria, I can talk about inspiring great ideas. So that's where we'll kick off. And really the theme is, if you go to the next one, mastering the obvious. I don't think that there is any real way that anyone could stand up here and tell you, this is how great ideas come to be. There isn't. But to start off, the first thing is be human. Know who you are. And I know that in the parody video, use the word authentic, but it's really true, because if you know who you are, you know what you can actually do, what you can actually invent, how you can actually disrupt, because you truly know what you stand for. And second is, know who you're talking to. And there's nothing worse than I hear this, well, we're talking to an 18 to 34-year-old woman who drinks coffee once a year. Great, you just eliminated 3 people in the entire world. That is not knowing who you're talking to. You should be able to humanize your target. So you could put that person in front of you and saying, I'm going to talk to you. I want to deliver an idea. I want to invent something for this person. That person needs to be tangible for you to really get to a great idea. So I have 3 parts. I thought that I would use some visual presentation and tell you some of the things where I feel like other brands have done good work. Some of my criteria is I would not do Nike, Apple, or Red Bull, because we've all sat through those before, so I tried to pick some other ones. So the first is Southwest. Know who you are. And I think this picture's rad over here, 1970s, got the hair going. But, I mean, they were born out of Herb Kelleher, friendly Texan, and they instilled that personality into everything they do. A great idea doesn't sometimes need to be tangible. Sometimes it's a personality, right? And they took the personality of the person who started that company and what he believed in, and they drove it through everything they did. I mean, bags fly free, what a boring topic. It was funny when they delivered it because they delivered it with a personality. So I think that's a great example of, you know, a great idea in regards to understanding who you are and bringing that forward. This story is a little bit of kind of gone wrong and now getting it right, which is, you know, Gatorade started off as a sport performance drink. That's who they were, that's what they did, and all of a sudden, here comes the Vitamin Waters and the Sobeys and everyone else of the world, and they got caught up in it, and they lost who they were. And so they went back and they created this three-phased approach. I like to think I'm an athlete and I'm involved on this stuff, but I've never bought number 1 or 3. I don't know how many they're actually selling, but the core business in regards to the energy drink, they've taken back all of their market share because they've demonstrated that they know who they are again. They're a sport performance company. So I think that's really, really important in regards to this phased approach is a great idea to get them to represent back to their core target that we know who we are, we're a sport performance drink company, we have a system for it. And know who you're talking to. So I'm not a cyclist, and I look at this and I go, it's kind of boring. It's a black and white picture of a guy on a road. I don't really get it. But this campaign that Rafa came up with has inspired a frenzy of social activity around understanding, like, what do cyclists dream about? What are they emotional about? What do they care about? And they care about the moments on the road. That's what they care about. So the whole campaign was born out of just intimately understanding who their target was. And this whole campaign is pictures like this with no words on it, and cyclists from around the world upload pictures and rally around this idea of celebrating the road. Again, knowing who you're talking to will get you to delivering great ideas. Dove, I think everyone's heard this, but, 98% of British women think models used in beauty advertising are unrealistic. 98%, it's not really close. But yet, for how many years did they just continue to trot out model after model? I mean, I thought it was a great idea from a guy's point of view, but, again, it's probably a bunch of guys like me trying to sell Dove to women that didn't understand it. So I think it's just really interesting, monumental change in the company and the brand by just understanding who are we actually trying to connect with and sell to. So, Master of the Obvious, Part 2, shit in, shit out. I can't tell you how many briefings I've been into that are dry, boring, piece of paper, goes across the table. It's like a eulogy as they deliver it. And then next thing you know, it's like, God, I got the work back and it sucks. Like, I can't understand. I mean, that's just weird. Well, it's because you didn't inspire creativity. You want good stories to be told back to you? Tell good stories. And, I just don't understand when clients do that and they send it over and expect things, you're setting the tone. You should be inspiring when you're delivering a brief. So the second is create a culture that allows that to happen, right? Provide things that people are like, wow, this is emotional. This isn't just a functional business problem that I'm setting. When we're trying to create great ideas, there's very few of those that are just like, this is really going to drive revenue. That's not where they usually come from. Usually that's a byproduct of a great idea being created. Encourage bravery, and that's easy to say, but you have to, when I think about being brave is be brave at the briefing, be brave through the development, and then if you got something brave, you got to defend it, and you got to make it happen. And then lastly is be accessible, be collaborative. Again, excuse me, goes back to the start, which is, if you're not available and you're not collaborating in regards to working with product, working with agencies, through the process, and you get to the end and they're like, you just didn't understand what I told you to do. You just didn't understand it. But you never talked to them the whole time? Where's the mystery, right? So make sure that you're involved in the process. So the story here, inspiring creative with creative, the brief that was written by ESPN back in the day was that their headquarters was the universe, the center of sport in the universe. That was the core of the brief. And they could have handed it over and said, all right, Wyden and Kennedy, you guys go figure that out. But what they did instead is they knew there was a day where they were filming a bunch of athletes at their headquarters, and they brought all their creatives into that moment. Gee, look what happened with the campaign. 500 episodes later, it's still running. They inspired creative by submerging them within that culture. So creating emotion in the culture, Richard Branson does an awesome job. I'm not saying all of you guys have to take a balloon trip around the world or something, but clearly this guy every single day walks into that building and is doing something to push people to feel like there's emotion in that culture to drive it. And, I think that's interesting. I don't know if I'd necessarily feel comfortable with this, but a glass-bottom plane to improve the flying experience, I think I may be scared shitless, but nonetheless, he's inspiring these ideas to happen all the time by creating a culture that's very creative, very liberating all of the time. And then encourage bravery. I work for Oakley. Ray-Ban's our sister company and competitor. But I celebrate this, that when they briefed it in, it was about history and about telling the history of the brand. But they also, and they were like, push us to think differently, to really develop something that's disruptive, because if not, it could be just a history lesson everyone forgets. And the fact that they brought this to market for a very conservative Italian company is awesome. And so this, in regards to encourage bravery, also you have to have the conviction to actually run it, or what is it worth? And then lastly, start with the end in mind. And I think, the ability to dream is where great ideas come from. So starting with the end in mind and starting with what you want the consumer to respond to. So not the marketing objective, and I'm a marketing guy, and they're very important. I get it. But what do you want the consumer to react? You want them to scare them? You want them to laugh? You want them to be curious? Like, what is it that you want out of that great idea to have the consumer actually feel is really important. And then envision what it could look like. And this is the what ifs and what if we could do this. For just a moment of time, I think that so many people have got caught in convention and limitation of what society says you can and can't do, that you never break out of those norms. Things just get retread. For just a while, think about what it could be. Sure, that plane was probably deemed unsafe to actually produce many times. There's a million of those examples. So give yourself an ability to start with the end in mind and then work it back. And I think a great example of that is, one of my favorite examples is Sir Dyson. But this guy, he made the wheelbarrow with the big wheel, the big round ball first, and then he said, I want to make a bagless vacuum. Why he was thinking he wanted to make a bagless vacuum, I have no idea, but nonetheless, the guy was thinking he was going to do that. And by starting with the end in mind, he went and saw this grain mill and the cyclone, and 5,000 prototypes later, apparently, he figured it out. But his ability to see that grain mill as an idea to get to where he wanted to end up is because he had the end in mind already. So think about that as you're trying to develop great ideas. So at the end of the day, recognition, recognize who you are, recognize who your consumer is, who you're trying to talk to. Preparation, prepare a good brief, inspire creative. Liberation, liberate the process, be brave, allow them to explore, to dream, and use their imagination to come up with great ideas. So thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So, as Megan mentioned, I lead Nielsen's advertising effectiveness practice. And if you think about different ways you might define advertising effectiveness, one is a productive relationship between brands and agencies. I mean, that's why brands and agencies get together in the first place. And, you know, in my role, I've had a lot of opportunity to talk to the clients themselves and to talk to the folks in the agencies and hear the expressions they kind of mutually like to talk about with their partners, and then even putting aside the media owners that are being worked with on any given campaign. And it would take me 2 or 3 hours to take you through all of those, but I thought I would focus on one of the most common themes I hear and actually see as people move through this relationship, working on whether it's an annual initiative or even a week-long campaign to drive people to a sale. And it has to do with the alignment that we've been talking about and the importance of alignment for a successful relationship. Maintaining a shared vision. So if you think about the people who are generally involved in this process, of course, you've got a brand. The picture is actually a little bit more complicated than it looks like here because, it's a good chance you don't just have a single creative agency or media agency. You may be working with multiple, particularly if you're working across screens and in different media. So you've got a lot of people involved there, and you've ultimately got people who own the media that you're advertising on. And, while it seems like common sense, the common objective here being to maximize advertising effectiveness, let's look at how this plays out often in terms of what we see. When the client fails to set, that expectation up front around what the objective is for the campaign, whether it's a marketing objective, whether it's kind of a consumer response or reaction, as we were talking about a moment ago, you basically leave everyone you're working with, kind of with free rein to decide what the objective for that campaign is. And when you do that, you end up with a lot of different answers. The creative side, we're all about, winning awards, very important to us. Media side, it's about pushing costs down and saving money. And, for a media owner, it could be about a lot of different things, but I see this quite often, hey, clicks for your advertising if you're talking about an online campaign. And this is all dysfunction out of the gate that's coming from a lack of setting that shared vision that we've been talking about this entire presentation. We're getting really tactical now. We're getting down to the day-to-day execution around what are we really trying to accomplish. And we see this again and again when we see kind of failure around individual campaigns that ultimately lead to failure around relationships in total. It has to do with a misalignment around, what are we actually trying to accomplish as we spend advertising dollars. So I wanted to share a few stats around, establishing objectives for campaigns from a survey of our brand and agency customers we did. Not surprisingly, almost everyone, I kind of wonder who the 2% are, say that it's really important to establish the objective for the campaign and whatever metric is going to be used to measure it in advance of an advertising initiative. So that's a start in the right direction. Only 6% of the agency folks we talked to said that they were regularly able to work with their client to do that. To put a little bit of color on this, primary marketing objective, that was a challenge because the client would often come and say, I have 5 different objectives that I'm trying to accomplish with this, which may be the case. But if you don't establish a primary objective, you're not able to really say, did we meet it or did we not? Versus, hey, objective 1 did here, objective 2 did here. So, some real kind of disconnect there. And finally, the folks selling the media, who I wanted to bring into this conversation also, often have no idea what constitutes success. They take a guess and they do their best on behalf of the people spending the money with them. But at the end of the day, if it's not made very clear to them what the initiative is trying to achieve, they only can do so much. Moving on to metrics to measure campaigns, I wanted to share another result from this same survey. This question actually asked brand marketers, what types of metrics they would like to use to measure the impact of their online brand advertising as opposed to direct response. Not surprisingly, the top box answer was, well, the same thing we use in the offline world, right? I mean, that makes sense. Cross-platform consistency. We want to take advantage of the few of the things that are available in the online world, but pretty straightforward. When we asked the same question of the people selling the media and the agencies reporting the media back to the marketers, what did they say they typically provided? Metrics specific to the online medium. So just another example of a disconnect that can lead to an ineffective campaign, an ineffective annual initiative, and ultimately an ineffective discussion when you go back to renew this relationship in the following year. You want to bring success stories to that discussion, not stories where you're arguing about whether or not the campaign worked or not because you were using different metrics or aiming in a different direction. So, at least at Nielsen, we've developed a framework to help brands and agencies think about simplifying advertising effectiveness. At the end of the day, it really boils down to, regardless of the screen you're advertising on, reaching the right people, influencing their opinion, and ultimately impacting their behavior at the cash register. And we refer to this as reach, resonance, and reaction. And we've used this, pretty successfully with our clients to help them align around whether it's a single campaign, again, or an annual initiative, ensuring you're always having this discussion and defining what your objectives are around these 3 points to bring that clarity that we were looking for. And so going back to that example we looked at a moment ago, when a brand is very clear about what they're trying to achieve and communicates that to everyone they're working with, and again, don't forget the people who own the media, it's the agencies, but those people who own the media are a key part of this also, you can get a much more consistent outcome. And if you're able to replicate this time and time again throughout your relationship, you're not always going to succeed with an advertising campaign. I mean, if that was the case, we'd all be rich. But, not all advertising works. But to the extent you can at least have an intelligent conversation around what worked and what didn't and why it didn't work, you're going to be better off. And to have that conversation, you have to be aligned around what the objective was for the advertising, what the metrics used to measure the objective were going to be. So this is my tidbit on, again, tactical, but in line with this entire kind of conversation we're having, the importance of aligning around a common shared vision or a common shared objective, whether that's at the start of the relationship when you're putting it together, whether that's in the creative phase of the relationship, or whether that's in the executional phase of the relationship. A few quick takeaways. Again, the 3R framework is a pretty simple way to have this conversation for agencies and clients. And, alignment around what constitutes success is really key to maintaining a productive, long-lived relationship. And, it really is the marketer's responsibility to kind of take ownership of defining, what those objectives are. They're the only people who can do it. It's their dollars that are being spent. But I would also say it's the agency's responsibility to push the marketer on that front. When the marketer comes back and is not clear about what they're trying to achieve or is trying to achieve 8 different things, I think it is the agency's responsibility to kind of push that marketer to define what equals success so everyone can kind of consistently think through that as you move through the relationship. And with that, I will turn it over to Keeping the Spark Alive.
Thank you, Jeff. It's great that I'm following Jeff because I'm the opposite of a numbers guy. I have this kind of approach that, hey, we're all people. It's simple. What do we want? Do unto others like you want done to you. So it's nice to have him kind of back up my methodology. But just to recap, my name is Brad Geiger. I'm from Leapfrog Interactive. We're based out of Louisville, Kentucky. For those of you that don't know where Louisville is, that's more Midwest in the center of the U.S. I run our Cincinnati, Ohio office, and it's a pleasure to be here. So don't worry, I won't leave this up long so you don't have to stare at it. But I think what everybody's said up here is amazing and great, right? We're doing everything that all 4 of these professionals have addressed. Our relationship's going perfect, but now the honeymoon period's over, right? And we all know what that's like in our personal relationships. So how do we keep that spark alive, right? Unfortunately, in most relationships, the majority of the time is spent in those upfront stages, and as time goes on and on, that lessens and lessens. So I'm going to give you some kind of quick tips on how we can get through that and keep the relationship going. And I know we've all been in those situations where we've had 3 projects going on at once. One's a new business pitch, one's a new client that we just landed, and one's a long-time client. Where's our attention going to go? Typically, we're going to focus on the new business pitch. That's where all the time and effort is going to go. Then probably the new client, because we want to impress them. We want to get more business out of them. And then, unfortunately, the long-time client kind of takes the back seat. So what can we do? I think first you have to set expectations. This is really important. This is a little bit of a recap into some of what's been said already. But the expectations have to be set at the beginning of the relationship, but they have to be reset throughout because relationships change. People change in different roles. Companies change overall. So I'm going to identify 3 different types of relationships. We have a brand and agency. In this type of relationship, you're going to have only key touch points that they interact with. Maybe a client review at the end of the project. But this is more of a siloed approach where they're typically working a little bit more in a vacuum. You have the next, after that fancy animation, where there's a lot more overlap. So this is where typically there's going to be a lot more check-ins. The brand or the agency wants to be involved more than the previous. And then very last is a lot of overlap. This is where you may get the brand that actually wants to be involved in those brainstorms. They want to be fully immersed in that process. So it's very important to identify what each party is expecting. If you don't, the whole rest of the tips don't make a difference. So set those expectations up early. So the first tip to keep the spark alive, surprise me in a good way. So I always tie everything back to an actual relationship because I live my life through analogies. So this is like going out to dinner, right? You go out to dinner. I'm bringing a date out. How I got to surprise them, right? They're used to going to dinner, but I'm going to maybe bring a candlelight dinner on the beach. So take it to the next level. But I say in a good way because I'm not going to surprise them with skydiving, right? There's still a level of expectation set that they know they're going to dinner. So the same way for agency or brand, they're asking for something specific. Make sure you're delivering on that, but bring them something even better. So don't go in left field, but stay aligned to their expectations. Sell me on it. I want to be sold. So there's a couple pieces to this, right? You got to sell your ideas. I think over time, you get so used to working with a client that you feel like you can come up with an idea and just essentially deliver on it. But you need to understand that the client doesn't know what that idea is. And this goes back to, I just gave a presentation a couple of weeks ago on how to give good presentations, which I shouldn't have said because you're going to critique me now. But the key here is an idea can be amazing, but if you don't communicate it well, it doesn't matter. So make sure that you're going above and beyond and selling that idea. The second part of this is I want to be sold. So this is just like walking into a store and you have a wallet full of cash. You want to buy something, but you can't find anybody that will sell. There's nothing more annoying. You're ready to pull the trigger and you want to be sold, but nobody's there to do it. So your relationship, you're there to sell things. So make sure that you're doing that. It's not going to be all smiles. I mean, I know we all know about this. What's funny is just recently we've had an experience with this. In our agency, we were working on Carnival Cruise, and I know everybody knows what's going on with Carnival Cruise. We came up with a gamification idea that we launched, I believe, in early January. Quick turn. First off, a quick turn project tends to give you some roadblocks as is. But then we were faced with the PR nightmare that happened to Carnival. So it really taught us not only to, how do you work with your client through your project, but understand that other things are going on with your client as well. So going back to, it's a relationship, the problems may not be happening between the two of you. There may be outside problems that happen as well. So make sure that you're working through those together. Respect my time. So this one was funny for me because as a young designer, it was always this, don't they get we have other projects going on? It's not all about them. I've got 10 different things going on. We can't just stop everything for them. But if you think about it from the flip side, it's the same for a client. The client has other things going on as well, so don't hassle them with question after question after question and deliverable after deliverable, because it goes both ways. And in order to have a good relationship, you need to respect their time. You need to understand that both parties have multiple things going on at once. And last but not least, because I know we're getting close on time, listen, don't hear. And I know this was touched on by Megan, but make sure that you're interpreting things correctly. I've always been a big believer in being in the meetings, especially coming from the creative end, because I feel like sometimes things can be lost in translation. But a lot of things can be read by tone, expression. A client may say, I want this read, but there may be a backstory to why they want it read. So don't just run off and make it read. I think it's in our best interest as professionals to make sure that we're listening. And with that, I'll open it up to questions.